funding distribution. Say you had $100 for your lemonade stand. 50% of that, or $50, would go to buying the supplies that need the lemons, sugar, water, all the cups, all that stuff. 25% or $25 would go to the advertising for your lemonade stand. $10 would go to the repairs and like your work area. Finally, $15 would go to your profits. This is exactly how our school is run.
Round Rock High School has a budget. They split money funding to all departments, giving each department enough money to fund themselves. The money funded is uneven, giving more money to departments with greater needs and interest. Some departments might think this is unfair.
Here's the main question. Do some departments give more money than school funding that is related to education and learning? We have observed many different perspectives on the situation from different departments of the school.
Here we interviewed Devin Leach, the biology teacher of the education department.
How do you feel about the funding distribution that goes on in the school?
I feel like because we are in a state tested class, we have the STAR test, that we might be a little bit more advantageous in receiving monetary support regarding other subject areas. I feel like they might fall short of that simply because they might not be state tested. So I don't know, I kind of am stuck in between in the middle because I am a state tested teacher. We need the money.
Do you feel like athletics gets too much money compared to education departments?
Honestly, I can't speak for how much athletics gets. I do know that the athletics department does get a good bit of money, but in comparison to like how much does athletics get and how much do we get, I mean, I couldn't tell you. I don't know how the money is separated out.
Okay.
Do you know the exact percentage your department gets or something?
In years past, we have been told how much our department gets. This past year, we weren't kind of privy to that information. We were told, this is kind of how much money we have based on the number of students that we have. And so within the science department, it's broken up according to science disciplines and then the number of students.
So pastors, do you know the percentage of pastors?
Oh, do I remember?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
And have you ever had to purchase supplies with your own budget?
Yeah, I pretty much buy things for my students every single time we need to do something. The good news is whenever we are in need for something that does cost a good bit of money, we can ask for support. One of the things that we were really kind of struggling on was the dissection. We get to lose a dissection this year because we didn't have the funding for it. And that's kind of heartbreaking because my sweet babies don't get to dissect the pig this year.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, we did some research. Athletics gets 1,700,000.
Okay.
Which is 0.47% of the budget. Which,
Okay,
which,
I see it.
Yeah, which compared to education and all is only 200,000 and all. So, yeah.
That's spread among all the athletics.
Right, the entire group. And so then does it have for individual departments, or it's just saying education
Yeah.
across the board?
Education.
Educational support, it's 212.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, how does that make you feel that we get that long?
Well, it's definitely enlightening, I guess, from not knowing that they get substantially more than education. I feel like that's something that needs to be fixed.
Okay.
And how do you feel that we can fix this problem?
Ooh, that's a really good question. We would need advocators. I am merely a peon. I am an educator, a teacher, and I can only do so much for my students. I feel like that's a big change. That's not something that's just focused within our school district. That's something across the world that all school districts are facing. So me personally, I would say we need more community support. We need more educator funding, backers, I suppose.
Science requires quite a bit of money to sustain labs and dissections. Ms. Leach talked about not having pig dissections like last year because of the lack of funding. Next, we talked to David McCarroll, an engineering teacher of the Career and Technical Department.
So how do you feel about that funding distribution to the school? Do you think it's fair?
I don't have a complaint with it. I mean, I don't know really what some of the other departments, how their funding goes, but I don't usually have a problem being able to get support for what I need.
Oh, okay. So, I was supposed to show you this athletics. I did a snooping around, and if you find out,
Oh.
athletics have like $1.7 billion, which is 0.47% compared to like education, which is like only 0.04% out of the total budget. And so, like, how does that make you feel about like funding?
Well, see, I'm up here at career and technical,
Okay.
which has almost as much as athletics. Not quite, but
Okay.
almost as much up
All
there.
right.
We're actually in a different spot, which may
Oh,
explain why
okay.
I answered my first question the way
Oh,
I did,
okay,
right?
okay, all right.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
so does students have to pay at all? Like, you have to, like,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we do ask for the students to pay into activity fund
okay.
that we can use if the funding we get for it is not enough.
Have you ever had to purchase anything with your own budget?
Or your personal.
I mean, I've never had to. There have been times where I have, and I can either get reimbursed or I've done it just because it was not worth going through the paperwork to get the reimbursement. I mean, I think all teachers eventually at some point just go, I need to buy something now, and it's easier to go ahead and get it and not worry about it. I didn't do it because I didn't have the money somewhere for it or couldn't ask for it.
Okay. So, but do you still feel like athletics gets too much compared to education-wise?
That's a tough question. And given what you showed me, maybe so, but I think you also have to look at what it is. Part of the reason why I get nearly as much as athletics is we have supplies that we have to purchase every year to stock the technology and things in the classes. We have to buy software licenses. And so that becomes a part of it. And I know athletics does as well. Education, say if you're talking math and language arts, we could put some more money in there, but the question is, what are they going to be buying with it? Do they have things they need to get?
Okay.
Mr. McCarroll did not seem to have a problem with the funding here at Round Oak High School. He had most of the money he needed to run his class. Here we interview Kurt Reeves, the athletic coach of the football department. He tells his side of the story.
So, how do you feel about the funding distribution, and do you think it's fair in this school?
I do think it's fair. It's kind of hard to distribute funding in references to athletics when you have so many kids, so many programs. I think they do a pretty good job of distributing the money and getting it where it needs to be and making sure that we have a well-rounded athletic program where we got a lot of different things that kids can do. So I do feel it's fair, and I feel it's about as good as it can be. You're not always going to please everybody, but as long as everybody has what they need to function, then I think we're doing a good job.
All right. So, do you? Oh, sorry.
Okay. Do you know the percent of funding you get for football? And at the end of the year, do you have any excess money?
The percentage of funding, I don't know personally, but because I don't handle the budget most of the time. But I would say football gets the highest percent of the budget than any other sport. Do we have excess money at the end of the year? No, generally we do not. We spend all the money. There's a lot of expenses associated with football. So making sure we take care of all that. By the end of the year, we drain the accounts.
So, do you ever not have enough money?
Yes. Yeah, there are times we don't have money. When you talk about a sport like football that has helmets, shoulder pads, all the soft gear pads, footballs themselves are anywhere from $80 to $100 just to buy footballs. So it is an expensive sport. It does bring in some revenue with the people, with the following in the games on Friday nights, but for the most part, we do kind of get short on funding, and really the percentage that goes to football, like I said, it is the most. It's probably fair, but it would be nice to get a little bit more for things like improvements on the weight room, facilities like the field house, press box, things like that need to be upgraded. We can't really do because we don't have the funding.
So, do you know like the minimal amount you would need to spend on equipment, like about?
Per year,
Yeah.
it's going to be several $1,000s on just equipment as far as shoulder pads, helmets. We do have to pay to have the helmets looked at, inspected to make sure that they're still good. We have to pay to refurbish any helmets that can be refurbished. We have to pay an even higher amount to replace any helmets that they deem are not of good quality anymore. Also the shoulder pads, we have to replace any shoulder pads that are inspected, don't pass inspection, replace any shoulder pads that are broken. So Replacing all those pads year in and year out, I'd say we have roughly from freshman all the way to senior, we probably have 230 to 280 kids maybe. So that's a lot of kids to get equipment for. So it would be several $1,000s. I would say upwards of probably $20,000 to $30,000. And then once you get into the facility fees, like weight rooms and things like that, then it's even more.
So, like, what do you think has the highest priority, though? Like, would athletics have the higher priority or education?
Well, education's obviously the highest priority. Funding wise, I think athletics plays a big part in that. There's a lot of student athletes who are involved in these programs who without athletics probably would not be successful in education. Myself, I was one of them when I was in high school, so I know that the amount of importance that athletics have. Also, just as far as the character building aspect, the team building aspect, that atmosphere, kids get a lot from athletics, more than just competition, more than just improving their physical well-being, but also their character, their mental, emotional state. I think athletics plays a big part in that.
All right, so I mean, I did a little snooping around, and I found the budget, and it's like about it's $1,700,000 or so. Is that like about right, or
For the district.
okay? So you actually don't get as much. You probably get like
Right. Well, this campus may get that much for athletics, not just football. Certainly
Okay.
not football. So I'm not sure the district distribution. I would imagine that may be per campus, maybe.
I think it's per campus. But,
Per campus. So that's not per sport. So per campus, that's divided up. You got to think about just name off the top of my head: tennis,
Yeah.
basketball, football, baseball, softball, golf, all these other sports. So it's a large amount of money, but it would go quick when you think in reference to all those sports, swimming included, girls basketball, girls sports. So it seems like a lot, but whenever you talk about how many kids that money serves, it's really not that much.
Do you know if the money is divided equally into sports?
I would say is equally as needed. Now, obviously, it's going to take more money to run a football program than it would to run a tennis program because of the needs involved, equipment. I'm not saying the tennis players are any less deserving. It's just the needs for is the same amount of money isn't there. They have a fraction of the student athletes that are involved, and then they also have a fraction of the equipment. But I think it's distributed pretty well as far as assessing the needs of each individual sport.
All right. Okay, I think that's it.
That's it?
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Coach Reeves gave us valuable insight into the football and athletics department on how they might get a bad reputation. Football and sports in general are a large part of the school. What most people don't pay attention is the smaller branch of sports. Here we interviewed Cal Kilbane, the tennis coach of that athletics department.
How do you feel about the funding distribution at Round Rock High School?
I think overall, we do a lot for our student athletes as a district and specifically on our campus. I would say the overall distribution, though, some sports definitely receive more than others, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to maybe some other districts, we have it pretty well here in Round Rock ISD.
Okay. Do you think the funding distribution is fair, and do you know the percent of funding you get for your sport?
I guess it depends on how you define fair. We seem to make it work with our budget, but in the grand scheme of the overall budget, I know it's just a very, very small fraction of the overall budget, especially compared to some of the bigger sports. But at the same time, the argument is made that those sports actually bring in income and ticket sales, where a sport like tennis, spectators come in for free, you only probably see a handful, and you're not really making money like you would with, say, everyone knows football.
So at the end of the year, do you have any excess money or do you not have enough money?
I spend our entire budget within the first week of having it. And that's usually all spent in July, and I have to then rely on fundraisers and boosters and other things to kind of make up for the shortages that occur.
How much do you think you need more to buy the things you need?
One thing that, I guess we are looking to get with tennis and golf is to be a part of the uniform rotation. Most sports actually get a uniform paid for the district. We don't currently get that, and we actually have a smaller budget, so it's a difficult thing to do. So a main goal that we have as tennis and golf coaches is to be part of that uniform rotation to ease some of that burden that we're kind of picking up at the moment.
Okay. We did a little bit of snooping around, and we found out athletics gains around $1,700,000. How do you feel about this?
You know, it's a big budget. Like I said, Roanoke ISD has a lot of money. And, you know, tennis and golf are very unique in the sense that it's essentially a year-long sport. And it's often viewed as a single season sport and given a budget of a single season sport. So I know there's, you know, our season is 8 months long. There are sports that have 3-month long seasons and has double the budget we do. So yeah, it's definitely, you know, something I think it's good y'all are bringing some light to, and something that needs to be maybe looked at a little further.
If funding was reduced in sports and put more into education, where do you think has the highest priority for funding, or just any department?
You know, I think an argument can be made one way or the other. You know, some kids really value school because of the fine arts, and some kids really value school for the athletics. You know, you have those individuals who may not even come, or may not get good grades, or may not pass if they didn't have that opportunity to compete. So I wouldn't say that there's priority one way or the other. I think that, you know, it should be pretty evenly distributed, and make sure that the students, whatever one they want to do, fine arts, athletic, you know, extracurricular activities, they're given that opportunity.
How do you think we can fix this money problem?
I think, you know, I guess there's not really a quick fix. There needs to be maybe some more research and studying into, you know, really what are the needs of some of these sports like tennis or like golf, and, you know, or swimming, something like that. And, you know, it's very clear what you need for football. And I think a lot of people who are making the decisions have those insights, but they maybe don't have the insights into some of the other, maybe smaller sports. So maybe some additional research, some more questioning, and maybe spending some time in the shoes of those coaches, trying to make that budget work.
Cal Kilbane also gave a point of view from smaller athletic departments. In fact, the interview, he told us that he got less than 1% of the funding of the athletic department. The next department we chose to take a closer look at was the art department. The interviewee requested to remain anonymous. Here's his interview.
So how do you feel about the funding distribution that goes on in the school, and do you think it's fair? I feel like more money should be distributed to the fine arts department. We seem to be lacking in facilities and supplies this year, especially room. We have a room situation here where we have 4 art teachers in 3 rooms, and next year we'll have 5 art teachers in 3 rooms. So is your funding funding based on how many kids you have? It is. We actually take lab fees from students. We charge students that are in our class, so in that way, yes. Okay. Do you know the percent of funding you get for your department? I do not know. Okay. And do you have to ever purchase supplies from your own personal budget? Rarely, but yes. I mean, if anything, if I have to go print something outside at Office Depot or something that needs to be done, we'll get it clean. So also, we're supposed to show you this. We found some like information how athletics gets like 1,700,000, which is like 0.47 compared to all, like, you know, learning and all. And like art, fine arts gets like only 50,000 compared to it. And so just wondering how that makes you feel, I guess. I understand that athletics is a huge, I'd say, moneymaker for the school. I mean, through football games, selling tickets, and all that sort of stuff. As well as, I mean, band is also. I mean, I'm sure I would think the band budget on there would be. What's the band budget on there? Because I'm sure they'd be comparable to that as well. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they'd be. Really? Because I know they get a lot of money as well. I'm not opposed to athletics getting that much money. Okay. I certainly wouldn't want to say otherwise. Okay. Yeah. Okay. If funding was reduced in sports and into fine arts, what would you think the highest priority would be in funding? Highest priority if we were getting more money, I think just facilities, space, and literal rooms, and then some sort of technology incorporated. Like I've had a broken scanner here for years. We've got 2 broken scanners. It'd be nice to have one that works. But you should like how do you basically get extra money? Like, you should skim it off of athletics. Okay. Anonymous. Okay.
The art teacher showed he had limited resources for his class. This is a big problem because we can't effectively teach students without enough space. We then interviewed Donald Hunter, a teacher at the design department. So how do you feel about the funding distribution at the school, and do you think it's fair?
It feels pretty fair. It's the first year at this campus, so I feel that the funding I've gotten from my classroom and from my students has been pretty accurate.
All right, and so do you know the funding, the percent of funding that you have for your department?
Honestly, I do not.
Okay, and so like, have you ever had to like purchase supplies with your own personal budget?
I have, but in doing that, I haven't sought reimbursement because the things that I would buy, I'm like, oh, I would use this myself. So I'm buying it like, it's like I'm using my personal stuff. So I buy it with my own funding. I just let the students use some of the things, and then, it's mine
Okay.
to use again.
All right, so on here, athletics, athletics uses like 1 million, which is like 0.47% compared to like education, which is like only 0.04%. And so I'm wondering how that affects your
Is this for the campus or for the district?
campus.
Or? Wow, really that much?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, how does that like change your view on the fund distribution?
That's pretty eye-opening. I would have thought that it would have been at least a lot more balanced. It feels like a lot. We got to kind of, I think, look at the return on that. I mean, sports are very important to keep students active and to build like team cohesion and that kind of thing. Yeah, it seems pretty pretty eye-opening. So the teaching and learning at the elementary level?
Yeah, elementary and secondary, which is like middle school and high school.
So then these numbers are for the district then?
Well, like they're for each campus, it's like divided, like it's like the budget plan for RISD, but it's like divided into like it's like it's for each campus, like
Allocations, campuses,
Yeah.
and departments?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, all right. So like, if funding was with this information that you've seen, like, do you believe that more funding should be diverted to education?
I think the purposes of schools are for education.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the education value per dollar spent is probably better used in the classroom.
Okay.
I'm not saying, go ahead and pull it. I just think we get more out of students when we put more into them in the classroom versus some other areas.
Okay. All right.
Cool.
Okay. So, Mr. Ketcher did not have much of a problem with the funding for his department, but have you ever been in his room? Do you even know that room existed? Do you know how much one of those costs? Ned's coach, he's a teacher, was a basketball coach, and is a tennis coach.
Feel about the funding distribution, and do you think it's fair?
I feel like the funding distribution is fair. I think that from the athletic standpoint, we have a set budget that we have to deal with every year, and for my program, it's an adequate budget.
This is just like the numbers, I guess. For athletics, gets like 1 million, which is 0.47, compared with teaching and learning, which is only 0.03.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering how does that affect your standpoint?
For me, sports is it generates funds, and so a lot of what you see in that figure there is straight numbers of what it costs instead of what the revenue is. So, for instance, a high school football game at Round Rock Stadium will produce a revenue that pays for a lot of its events. High school basketball, same way.
All right. So what about the smaller sports? What about them?
Well, like a college budget, it's funny because usually typically your football program covers enough to fund the secondary sports. And I use secondary just in a sense of participation numbers being smaller. So generally,
when you have a large number like football, and then you have a large crowd that they can produce, then you have a revenue generating program. Basketball won't be that way. Basketball usually breaks even because they have a smaller number of students. Baseball is pretty close to breaking even, but usually you see in the things like tennis, golf, they may cost a little bit, but usually the other major sports cover that for them.
Okay. Do you know the minimal amount of money you need to buy equipment?
Minimal amount of money to buy equipment would probably, for the basketball program, would run somewhere between probably $3,000 and $3,500 a year works for us.
So, like we also interviewed like smaller, like as you said, like the secondary sports, how they like don't get as much money. Like even like all the standards, they get like 1% of the athletics, lower than 1% of the athletics funds. Like, does that affect it in any way?
Well, I'm a realist, so when I look at things, I don't look at the overall numbers. I try to look more at what it is, what your cost per child is, and then what the revenue per child is.
Okay.
And when you see that, usually you see that it's pretty equitable.
All right. So you believe that they're so like basically you believe that sports has to like not the higher priority, but like you probably believe that education is the highest.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're at school to learn, for kids to get an education, but extracurricular activities is a huge part of what schools are about, in building a community, in building a sense of pride. And when I say sports, I mean that includes all fine arts, any extracurricular activities. I think our band is outstanding. 300 students participating in band. So you allocate funds there because of the community it creates within the school.
Okay. As a teacher, do you ever have to purchase supplies with your own personal budget?
I have, but not an exorbitant amount. So in 21 years, I've never really had to spend a great deal of money on that personally.
All right. So do you know the percent of funding you get for the education department? Like,
I don't know the percentage we get. No.
okay. All right.
He gave an interesting point of view that again shows that athletics departments might get a bad reputation. Here we snagged an interview with Ms. Nichols, our principal. Okay. So could you show us the distribution of funding for Round Rock ISD, and is this open to the public?
For Round Rock ISD or for Round Rock High School?
Both.
Okay, and so it is open to the public. I'm not sure if they have it or if it's a matter of someone can do an open records request, but everything that happens within the school, even emails, everything is always open to the public. What happens is that the school district allocates funds based on how many students were allocated. And so there's a formula for everything that happens. As far as for teachers, based on years, how many people we have in athletic programs, there's a formula for everything that happens. And it's absolutely open. Even as far as the budget for each high school. Every campus principal does their budget a little bit differently because every school's a little bit different. So for example, when we do our budget, I take historical data, 3 years worth of data as far as what different departments have needed for resources, for materials, for intervention, for professional development, and then also based on how the school is growing. And then based on that, we figure out then how much money we need to give to each of the departments.
Okay. Do you think this distribution of funding is fair
Okay, now be more specific.
for all the departments?
Okay, yes. If I were going just off of 1 year, I would say no. And then also, there's always a matter of if something comes up and someone needs something extra, they have to make a case for it. But then I always have money that I can shift from another funding source within my budget to make sure that they're taken care of. But they always have to say why the need, how it will impact student learning. And that kind of makes my decision as far as how each department gets money. But you also have to realize when you do your budget, it's not just based on departments. It's also based on, there's money I have to put aside for subs. There's money that I have to put aside for professional development. There's money I have to put aside for parking and all the resources and the things that we have to buy to keep that up. So there's a lot of different money for a lot of different things within the school, not just for the different departments.
Okay, so
What you're saying even is not accurate.
okay.
So athletics is pulled together within one source. And what happens then they allocate the different amounts to the different schools. And so based on stipends for the different coaches, and so a lot of that may be pay. It may be based on taking care of different facilities, as so maintaining Dragon Stadium, Kelly Reeves, and all those different things. So when you see athletics, there's a lot more underneath it than just saying we're giving it to a sports team. Uniforms every year for the different schools, all those things. Now, all the other things that you see as far as budget, so for example, you see professional development. You see stuff for portables. The portables are for students. So you have to look and realize that a lot of all these other things, while it may not specifically say this is for teaching and or learning, it does go towards that. So you have to learn to how do I look at the budget and how is it being used. Portables, by and large, those are portables when you go by all the different campuses and we have to use it as classrooms because some of the schools have, there are too many students for their, the brick and mortar part of the building. That money is going towards education. When you look at print services,
Sorry.
it's okay, print services is the money they give to the different campuses so that when teachers are printing copy for materials. So you can't look at it and say it's athletics and this is how much they're giving to the schools. Everything else is a matter of going to schools.
Okay.
One of the biggest part of our budgets is for teachers. And so the budget as far as for the district, teachers represent about 85% of our budget. So you have to figure out also how do I look at it. So to just say athletics is getting $1 million and change, and for education we're not getting as much. Almost everything else is education.
Okay, that's actually an interesting point of view. But also like these departments, like it's 30 million, like compared to like this, like all this does not add up to 30 million. So I think like this is like to the whole.
Right. So I think the 44,575,127 is the total.
Of all
everything.
this?
Yes, and so
I
that's-
added it up, it's not 40.
right, and so what I'm seeing, it says total allocations versus department. So I'm thinking there's more money as far as for different things elsewhere.
Okay.
So look, for example, at Round Rock High School. Based on our enrollment, that's how much I get in budget, and then I have to allocate all that money in order to get everything done on campus.
Okay, alright.
Okay. Have there been any complaints about departments lacking any money?
Every year, everyone will come. They're not major complaints, but every once in a while, people said, oh, okay, like for example, I met with the science department. Hey, Miss Nichols, in biology, we want to get some fetal pigs so that we can do a dissection. And so one of the questions that I ask is this, is it part of the curriculum? And is there another way to accomplish that? And so in looking at it, it's not part of the curriculum. It would be an enrichment. And those fetal pigs cost a lot of money. So then my question is, because it's not part of the curriculum, is there a different way for us to accomplish the same learning for less, since it's not a necessity? So those are the conversations we have every day. And it's always going to be a matter of, how does it support the curriculum? Is it a necessity? Is there a different way that we can get the same thing accomplished?
Okay, so we also talked to like different coaches, like other than football, of course, and they also complained about like they're not getting like uniforms. Like the tennis coach doesn't get like uniforms. And how like is that a problem, a big problem, or do you think that?
I think it is. One of the things that happened here is this. Understand that everything that each of the different departments have is not necessarily from money that has been given by the district. A lot of the things that happens within our campus is based on community support, based on boosters, and based on grants. So when you see the football team in new uniforms, those new uniforms did not come from district. Those came from our boosters and their fundraising activities. So people have to understand what is the funding source for some of the things that are happening. At the district level, the money that you saw, all of the campuses are put on a certain rotation as far as how often we get new uniforms for each of our different teams. And new uniforms is about, I think there's like 7 to 10 years is how often we get uniforms. And so when I say yes, and all those things, the pads, the equipment costs money, so all of that has to be understood. It's not that they get it very often. So what happens is the boosters for football is a well-run, very developed machine. So they're able, because of that and their fundraising activities, to raise money. And then what happens is they gift the money to that department, and then that department is then able to use it for their athletes. Tennis is not as fortunate as far as having a booster club. In fact, that specific sport has not been as built up as it's been for other sports. Within the last couple of years, I know that Mr. Kilbane has been working very diligently on that. And specifically, I have allocated extra money. So things that you see at the tennis courts, the chairs that are currently there, you would be surprised to know that each of those chairs cost $1,000. So there are specific things that I have allocated, knowing that he needs to build his program to make that area nicer so we can attract more kids to the program. So it's unfair to say they're not being taken care of. Once they let me know what their need is, then we sit down and we figure out how can we go about and meet their need, and based on the money I have set aside, how can I help them build, and also how can I help them have a booster club or some other source of money that's self-sustaining for their organization.
So basically, if someone has a problem, they could just come to you and you can...
Always, just like you just walked in.
All right. Yeah. Got anything? No? All right, yeah.
But let me say this, it doesn't mean I'm not going to ask the important questions. So it's always going to be, how does this relate to the students? Why is it necessary? Is there a different way for us to get this done that's cheaper? Yes, so they still have to work in order to get it. They just don't come in and say, we need X, Y, Z, and they get it.
All right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Ms. Nichols announced that all the funding was completely fair due to traffic of the students entering each department. Only certain amounts of money are needed to complete the techs and units in education, extra, above and beyond activities, and are all privileges.
The funding distribution here at Round Rock High School isn't very known to any students or departments. That means students and teachers should all be informed of the funding on each department. That could also mean our funding has been doing great, where no one bothers to care.
So what do you think? Is the funding at Brown Rock perfectly fine the way it is, or does money need to be more evenly distributed between departments? Thank you to all our teachers and faculty members that allowed us to film and interview their opinions. Devin Leach, David McCarroll, Kurt Reeves, Kyle Kilbane, Donald Kenter, Cody Blake, and Natalie Nichols.